Are you thinking about becoming a celebrant? Perhaps you know someone doing it and want to follow in their footsteps. Being a wedding celebrant isn't just observing someone else's life milestones. In some situations, it may touch you very deeply, particularly touching wedding stories. Tune in and learn about Pete's life as a wedding celebrant in the wedding industry in Australia.
So hello, Peter.
Hello.
I am so thrilled. You're halfway across the world. And hi, everybody. Maria Romano here from True Love Knots. And I'm so jazzed to have Peter here all the way from Australia. So hugs and smooshes to you. Peter, welcome to True Love Knots podcast and YouTube channel. And you know what? Tell us who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on, Maria. And it was great to have you on my podcast as well. So thank you for that. So who am I? I'm a celebrant. I'm Pete the Celebrant. And I am down in Australia or down under. I predominantly do weddings throughout the year. I do funerals as well. But, you know, particularly in this last June, 6 months, it's just been crazy with weddings. So I'm based in Melbourne, and we were definitely the lockdown capital of Australia. So the last 2 years before this, like many places around the world, weddings just didn't happen. So finally, we've been able to get back into it. And I would say I've done 2/3 of what I would normally do annually in 6 months. So it's just been crazy. Actually, almost 3/4. It's been crazy, but it's been great. It's been really good.
And that's probably because of the lockdown, because people were locked down. Now they're getting it and about. I know that Australia, the whole country they were pretty fastidious, and they made sure that they followed lots of COVID restrictions. You know, we had, of course, our COVID restrictions here, but Vegas was still open. And last year, for me,
Sure.
It was a record number. And this year it's just exceeding. So I understand people are getting married. So, you know, tell us how you got started. Let's hear your story.
Sure. So I grew up, my mum was a ballet teacher. She had her own ballet school. So every year we would look forward to the concert, and she would always get us involved in doing things, always little roles, just, you know, she would tell a Christmas story, and all the dances would be at Christmas. We'd be the kids on the side to just help bring this story. So I was always very used to being up front on a stage. I remember doing little performances in school for drama when I was younger, doing drama when I was older. When I was a teenager, I went to a youth group, and I really got involved in the church youth group. I remember wanting to be, you know, a youth pastor about year 7 or something. I'm not sure what that converts to in American school. It's sort of, I think, maybe middle school.
Second grade is 7.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's young. It's young to know what you want. Go ahead.
No, I was probably like 14, 15, around that age. It was just a great experience because the youth pastor at the time really gave me a lot of opportunities to get up there, get on a mic, do a lot of the speaking and the talking, and would then help me sort of, you know, just perfect that art. Then I went and did my study, was a youth pastor for 5 years. So learning to essentially talk to and control a room of, you know, 100 youth gets, you know, you definitely pick up a lot of skills in that time as well. We shifted, we changed with who we were, and we finished up with the church. And I had this upfront speaking skill that I wanted to use, public speaking, but I wasn't sure how I could do it, where I would take it, what I would do with it. Was it just going to be lost? So a friend recommended, why don't you become a wedding celebrant? And I'd married a few couples before when I was in the church community. And I was like, well, it was a pretty good experience. I enjoyed it. It's standing up the front. You've got the best seat in the house. You can feel the energy in the room. You can help, you know, bring it to a different level. And I was like, that sounds like a pretty good job. And I was pretty keen to run my own business as well. So here in Australia, to become a celebrant, you've got to do a course. It's not very hard. So I did that. And from there, you just begin running your own business.
So do you do this full time?
I do. I have the privilege of being able to do it full time.
Yeah. I think that is absolutely wonderful. So So you're saying that you go through a course now. Does this course teach you how to preside over weddings, or it's just basically their as far as the licensing requirements of what you have to follow in order to marry a couple?
It's a little bit of both. And the standards have definitely gone up, I'd say, in the past 5 years since I've been a celebrant. When I started, I did the online course. It was predominantly the legal side and handling of the paperwork and, the what ifs, the questions that you're probably unlikely ever to encounter, but at least you know what to do if you do. And there was a few, you had to record doing, a ceremony and then send it to them. Nowadays, it's a lot more, you've got to do a lot more presentation, I think, up in, that skill is being developed, as well as then all the legal side as well. So I think a lot of celebrants who have been in the industry for, 10 plus years have started to take on these or started their own learning institutions and then helping other new celebrants come through, but also holding them to a higher standard to make sure that when people are getting choosing their celebrant, they're getting someone of a decent caliber.
And that is so important. That's why I created the course here in the United States, because it's important that you want to have people that are going to perform this ceremony. Listen, let's face it, you don't get a chance to do it over. This is not like, hey, stop the camera. Hey, everybody, come on back, right? Bring the video guy back, bring the photography back, bring the guest back because you admitted something. So you're right. I think it's important to develop the skill sets. Number one, to know your outline, know your ceremony, know your couple, but it is a part of presentation skills. And it has helped me because I've been doing this for 12 years. And as far as presenting, when I go out and speak publicly. And I'm sure that has definitely helped you. And now, do you speak publicly about love or anything? I speak about love. So I didn't know if besides, besides presiding over weddings, you said you wanted to maybe, speak in a professional way. Have you developed?
Oh, do you mean going and talking like at conferences and that?
Yes.
I don't go and I haven't really looked at that as being something that I do. I do MC a lot of different events, predominantly wedding receptions, but I do MC other corporate events as well. Mm-hmm. So no, I don't sort of go out and talk specifically about love to others, but maybe that's something we need to talk about and see if that's something that
absolutely. You know what? It is. Let me tell you, right now, the world, as we know, is changing. I mean, have you seen a trend of maybe more millennials getting married? What have you seen the trend over the last few months?
The trend over the last few months, one has probably been what people wear at weddings. What at least in Australia, or I guess I should say in Melbourne, because that's where I'm based. Like I shouldn't speak for all of Australia. In Melbourne, a lot of the trend has been very rustic, wineries. People want to get married in a barn, do a bit of a DIY type wedding. And then it's taken a big shift in this past 6 months where it's gone a lot back to more classic, where people are getting married, more event spaces or more historical, places within Melbourne, old, old historic buildings and that. But everything seems to be more that tux, very simple, black and white, and that was a big shock for me because I always loved getting my colors, a few different jackets and heaps of different ties and all that, and bow ties. And so when it goes to black, it's like, that's cool. I have no problem, no issue with getting my black and white, my tux, and I've got a lovely velvet black jacket I enjoy wearing. But it was a shock to see. I was like, we've come back after COVID, and it's like we just want black and white weddings, very classic. So talking to those in the industry, that's probably one of the biggest changes.
It's probably that great Gatsby era where people loved, putting on the long gowns and of course the tuxedos and stuff. Now it's interesting, as a celebrant, you get to wear a lot of color because most celebrants here in the States, it's usually all black. Winter, summer, spring, fall. Yes. Really? Unless somebody requests, or unless it's a theme wedding. So maybe you're dressing as Elvis, or maybe Michael Jackson, or whatever it is. But usually I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Look, I talked to couples and I asked them, what are they wearing, particularly what is the groom wearing and what is his jacket, if they are a bride, and a groom. And I asked, just so I can pair well. So I don't want to turn up in the same color suit. If they're wearing velvet, I'm like, well, did you want me to wear velvet or not wear velvet if we're both wearing black? Just to make sure that, you're the one standing out here. Or it's like, maybe it's the tie, just making sure the tie is the same color as the bridesmaids, just so the photos all come together. I've never done an Elvis wedding. I have done a Batman wedding before.
Okay.
They were into cosplay, and he had this incredible Batman suit. It was the real deal. And so I remember another celebrant who was moving to the US couldn't do it. And so he said, can you step in and do it for them? I'm like, not a problem. Happy to chat with them. So we met and they had the suit in the car. So we were talking, they go, hey, let's just check that you actually fit the suit as well. No worries. So we get in the car park and I'm changing in the car park, like just outside the car, into this Batman suit, fit perfectly. And that was a very fun wedding to do. Everyone dressed up as their favorite DC or Marvel. And it was fantastic. It was a lot of fun.
That must have been very interesting. So tell me also, we talked about ages. Like, what about ages are you finding as far as the couples that you marry?
Ages, I'd say, are predominantly the late 20s to mid 30s. I would say that's maybe mid 20s to mid 30s are probably, I would say, the predominant age group.
Is what you're seeing. And how far, so in Melbourne, how far in advance do your couples book your services?
Everyone's different. I would say the trend is most would book a year in advance. Some will book at least 2 years in advance. Then some will book a few months. Some will book 3 weeks before, and I have to tell them there's an issue there with the legal stuff. If you wanted to talk about that, happy to. But I would say predominantly people are at least looking forward 9 to 12 months ahead before they book anything. And then there are some who are they're all over it. They're really great at planning, and they're planning a couple of years ahead, and they're locking everything in so they can have a bit of just rest time, then gearing up to the day.
Now, okay, so interesting. So in Las Vegas, okay, in Nevada, you can fly in. Our marriage license bureau is open 8 a.m. to midnight, 365 days a year. We're not closed for any holidays. You can get your marriage license, provided, of course, you have your ID, and go get married. So tell me about the paperwork aspect of getting your marriage license. All right, I'm bracing myself.
Look, there's no shotgun weddings in Australia. In fact, I heard something the other day that possibly Elvis impersonators aren't going to be able to do weddings anymore. Is that a thing?
No,
maybe I heard that wrong.
That's not true.
It's not true. Okay.
No, I think these attorneys got a little aggressive because there's an Elvis documentary coming out. And I spoke to somebody today at the chapel that I work out who spoke to the attorneys. Their attorney spoke, and they said they're kind of backing off. Yeah, it's kind of hard to do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
Maybe it's a bit of publicity.
Tell me about the process of getting the paperwork.
Okay. So I guess it will sound quite strict, I guess, in terms of not being able to get married at the drop of a hat, but I think it's more of just having a cooling off period, like just making sure that both parties are happy to go ahead. And I think just making sure that no one's being pressured into it as well. So you have to have at least one calendar month to sign a document called what is called the Notice of Intended Marriage. We don't have a wedding license here in Australia, but if we did, the Notice of Intended Marriage would be the closest thing to it. So the couple needs to fill that out, pre-fill that, and then submit that to a celebrant who agrees to be able to marry them. Now, it has to be witnessed by either a celebrant or a justice of the peace or a police officer or a doctor. And there are a few different ones if you're signing it overseas. So if you're in America, you might need to get it signed by like an Australian consulate. And then you send that to an Australian celebrant, and then you agree the day, the time, and that's when you're getting married. And that has to be in the celebrant's hand at least one calendar month before. There are some instances where a couple might book everything and then realize, we need a celebrant. And 2-3 weeks before, they give you a call and say, hey, can you marry us? And I'm like, I can definitely marry you. I could even join you on the day. I just can't marry you legally on the day. And so what we do is we go, we do everything as normal. We meet, go through the story, we sign all those documents. I prepare everything. We go there on the day, and then we just meet up later on, maybe 3 weeks later after the day. We have a beer or a wine, we sign everything, and it's all done.
I like that.
Yeah,
so still want to be married, and they still want to be married.
Yeah, look, I did 2 of those this year because they still want to be married. They've already booked everything, and it's like, well, don't not go ahead. Definitely go ahead with everything. We just legally need to do it later. And I do need to say at the start that it's not the legal wedding. So it's not a bit of a downer to say that, but you just need to let everyone know, hey, they wanted to get married so much that we decided to organize the wedding, and we can't legally get married today, but we'll do that later on. There's not a problem. And then you just launch into everything from there. I had 2 of those this year, actually. So some people are just keen to get married. It's great.
Well, that's okay. I mean, that's wonderful. So how do you market yourself, Peter? How do you market yourself, your services?
I market myself, obviously, through the website, through social media and Facebook, Instagram. There's a few wedding directories. There's probably the biggest one in Australia is Easy Weddings. They thankfully sponsor my podcast as well, and I have a great relationship with them. They are also based in England, I believe, as well, but they're probably the largest one. You can find just hundreds of thousands of vendors on their website, but then there are smaller boutique ones as well. Like I'm also part of Ivory Tribe. There's like Yarra Valley Experiences. There's just different smaller boutique ones. So people will, and if you're getting married in the Yarra Valley, which for us is a lovely winery area, they would say we're getting married at this winery, and they might then start looking, celebrants in Yarra Valley. And so then just these smaller boutique directories will have celebrants they recommend and part of their website. So yeah, predominantly that way. And then there's word of mouth as well. People see you at weddings. Like the wedding I did on Sunday, another couple that I'd married before came up and said hello, and the bride and groom for that day had seen me at their wedding. So that a lot of that as well.
Well, I'm sorry, how many years did you say you've been doing this?
5 years.
Okay. Yeah. And I think it just gets better and better. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, have you had anything that really sticks out, any couple, any experience that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Look, the Batman one was definitely a nice different one. That was quite unique. Is there anything specific?
Well, like, did you have somebody that really wasn't, maybe you didn't think they should have gotten married, or something happened that, was a blooper?
Oh, yeah, I got, sure. Weddings are full of bloopers. Whenever you're supposed to have something that's going, perfect, like stuff happens, and that's okay. And it's all about, I think it's all about making sure that whatever happens on the day, that you make the most of it. And so it's not a mistake, rather it's something that adds to the day, and it becomes a story, it becomes a memory, because inevitably things are going to go wrong in some way. And what you obviously want is the things that go wrong that don't really matter that much. So I'll tell you first, I guess, when I meet a couple, and maybe you get asked this a lot, do I meet couples who I think won't make it or shouldn't get married? One of the things we do need to do as a celebrant in Australia, there were a few other documents I didn't cover, by the way, but the notice of intent is probably the most important one. When we meet up and we sign and we go through everything, we talk about going and seeing maybe a marriage counselor, or maybe going and taking part in a course. And in Australia, there's a bit of a stigma with going and seeing a counselor or psychologist as a couple with a relationship. Not so much personally. Personally, it's sort of like seen as like a growth and a growing area. But as a couple, it's almost seen as well, I don't need to do that. Like, we're good. Like, we know how to have a relationship. And it's like, that's not even the reason I would recommend it. And I'm sure you do know how to have a relationship. I think one of the best reasons to go and do a pre-marriage course or something is because it just brings up questions that you might not have talked about yet. Or it gets you into a conversation that will reveal some assumptions that one or both are going into the relationship with. Like, how are you going to raise your kids? You know, who's going to do the washing, or who's going to do the most people live together before. And so the house duties and that are normally already sorted out. But I think that it just raises questions. So when you're in the relationship, you're not going to have issues with things that like, but I thought it was going to be like this. And I think a silly example would be, I remember hearing a couple when they were married, they had kids. The wife was getting really upset at the husband because he wasn't cleaning the shoes, like the kids' shoes. He wasn't polishing them on a Sunday.
Okay.
And he was like, I don't understand why this is an issue. Like, why would you think I would do this? And she would get really upset until she realized that it was her dad who always used to polish their kids' shoes every Sunday, just religiously. Every Sunday, he'd do their shoes for the week. And she realized that it's not that he has to. It's just an expectation that she went in with thinking, isn't that what all families do? So I always recommend, yes, go and see a marriage counselor. There's a great course, the Fuel Collective, I recommend my couples do, helps them plan out, then sort of a bit of a 5-year plan, but talk also about just some key areas of your relationship and what you're going into. So that's definitely one. There's only been 1 or 2 couples that I would have met, and I'm not sure if they don't sound in the healthiest state as I would like them to be. But I also go in with the mindset that when I see a couple, when I see someone, what I'm really seeing is one part of their relationship at one part of time. I might meet them for like an hour and a half. They might have just had a bad day. They might have had an argument on the way in. And, I might meet them initially and like, oh, they're so great and happy. And then later on, they're like, oh, they're a bit different to what I expected. So if you meet someone in one part of their life, and then 5 years later meet them again, they're going to be most likely a different person. So my hope is, even if I meet a couple and I marry them and I'm sort of like, there's a few questions coming up, nothing big. Like, I think the one thing that would really, I'd need to raise, I really need to question, would be if there was like a form of abuse going on, that there was something. Yeah. But if it's just like, they sort of have a bit of a bicker at each other. It's like, maybe that's just who they are. They're a bit of a bickering couple, because there are those couples. They just bicker at each other. So for me, it's trying not to go to judge them and go, I don't think you should get married. It's, I guess, leading them in a direction saying, I think every couple should go do a course just to help really build your relationship and to make sure that you're going in there with no ill assumptions. But then, I hope as well that as they change and develop, they would learn more about each other. They would learn to love each other in a deeper way, and there's deeper respect. So I'm trying not to go in with that sort of judging sense of, I don't know, because it's not up to me. And the law in Australia is, if there are 2 individuals who willingly want to get married, that's totally their business.
That's interesting that you say that, because I had a couple that I married a few weeks ago. It was their 4th marriage each, to each other. Okay.
Oh.
Look at your face.
Oh, right. I'm like, hang on.
Yeah. 4th marriage.
That's a very expensive relationship.
That's what I said. And I looked at her and I said, I don't want to know. She goes, you don't want to know. 28 years, 5 kids. I don't know how many grandkids. I said, okay, no judgment. So I just think it's interesting. I like what you talk about. And I think that's so true. A lot of couples don't ask the right questions sometimes. And having somebody that is objective, that can bring up, have you thought about kids? Have you thought about raising money? What if something happens to your family? You have to take care of one of your parents. Are we going to, you have to dig deep. And as you get older, what's going to happen if something happens to one of us? What are we going to do?
Yep.
What's going to, so, there's so many questions that sometimes we just don't. We're in love, right? We just see everything with rose-colored glasses. Gosh, I have to tell. So tell me quickly, because we don't have a lot of time left, and I want to honor your time. Is do you have like a certain format that you follow? Like in Las Vegas, we have our welcome, our opening. Do you have any type of format that you work with in Australia? Excuse me, in Melbourne, that works for you?
Yeah. So you can have the ceremony however you want. legally, there's only a few things that we need to do to get married. A celebrant needs to say the full names of the couple. They also need to say the monotem on the day, which is just the legal paragraph of what marriage is in Australia. The couples then needs to say their vows, which is one legal sentence, which is basically, I ask everyone here to witness that I take you to be my wedded husband, wife, partner. And then we sign the documents. 2 witnesses sign the documents. So that's sort of on the day. That's legally pretty much everything you need to do. So everything else is very up for it's played it. You can really make it what you want. My format that I normally go with is a bit of an introduction, welcoming everyone, talk about phones and that. The bride would then walk down to the music, and then from there I jump into their story. And it's something that we've prepared before. I like to memorize the couple's story because then I can just roll with it on the day. I can just actually engage with everyone there and looking everyone in the eye, and all their friends and family. Then we go into, normally then there might be a reading. I'll then share the monotem. We'll go into the vows, rings. Then they'll kiss. I'll sign the document, or we'll all go sign the document, come back, pronounce them both. They'll walk down the aisle.
Interesting. So you have to sign the documents and then pronounce. So it's a little different than what we do. But I love that. I think it's great.
I can't look legally. I'm not sure if it's as long as the documents are signed on the day, that's not a problem. So I can pronounce them husband and wife, and then we're going to sign it after, because sometimes they just want to husband and wife, they walk down the aisle and then they'll kiss and walk down just to save that 5 minutes out of the ceremony. Yeah.
No, I love it. And again, what's great is you have certain verbiage you have to use. We have to make sure they say I do, of course, and follow whatever format. If they have any enhancements, I call them, the unity candle, the sand ceremony. Those are all things that are, you talk about it. Yes, memorizing the couple's love story is very important. And I've seen so many officiants that they need to have that book in front of them. It's their crutch. And once you get relaxed and know your basic format, you can weave anybody's story into that.
Yeah.
Right? And that's, so I love what sounds like you're really rocking it there, Peter. I have to say that. So anything you want to say or share to our listeners before we sign off? Because I want to honor your time, and I'm so thrilled you came on today. Today for Tuesday, you for tomorrow, Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, you'll join us soon on the Wednesday. It's anything else I want to say? Look, if any of your listeners or couples want to hear a little bit more about the Australian wedding industry, I do have the Wedding Guide podcast. They're always welcome to listen to that. And we talk to a lot of wedding vendors here in Australia, and I talk to couples as well and get their thoughts, and talk to venues and that as well. And it's a great chance to talk about what weddings are like, advice that they would give, things, how they would structure things.
Well, I'm going to my podcast because I'm going to make sure that I do that now and subscribe so that I can listen to everybody hear me. I'm doing this right now. I'm finding the I do. And you know why I think it's important? First of all, whether you're getting married in the States or anywhere, you never know what you're going to learn. You might learn something new and something that you might want to incorporate in your own wedding. And that's how I look at it. Well,
I think the biggest advice I'll pass on from a lot of other vendors in that is to do the wedding your way, and to look at, sometimes you've got to keep other parties happy, family, things like that, tradition, but really going there and what do you want your wedding day to look like? Ideally, we're pretty much hoping to do this once, and you want to make this look like how you want. And even if it is your second and third ring, that doesn't make it any less, but own your day. And if your day looks different, go with that. Be you. I think that's probably one of the biggest advice that I get from couples, and said they're glad they did what they wanted to do. And from other wedding vendors, that's what they'd recommend as well.
Well, you're right. And it should be done their way because it's their wedding ceremony. So you're 100% right. We try to encourage that as well. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. I'm so thrilled you came on. I hope we have conversation again, whether we talk about finding love, in love, or wedding ceremonies. I'm all about that. And friends out there, remember, stay healthy, happy, and safe, and continue to spread love. Have a great day.